Mistaken identity transforming jealousy into authenticity. What if the ugly emotion you have spent a lifetime trying to suppress, your burning jealousy, is actually the guardian of your greatest power? Imagine believing you are a fundamentally bad person because you feel resentment when others succeed. You judge yourself, you hide, and in doing so, you unknowingly sever the connection to your own 2-year-old self, the one who was born unbeatable.
Today, we step into the constellation field to witness a physical necklace hit the floor and a mother's grief dissolve, allowing a daughter to finally stop shrinking. We are reclaiming a mistaken identity and finding the profound relief that comes when we finally choose authenticity over envy. Welcome to Younique Yet Connected. I'm Nolitha Xozwa, Fenton, Itolokazi, the explorer of the unseen, the unheard, and the untold. The space holder, seeker, and sacred witness in the work of systemic family constellations. As always, I'm not alone. Kinga and Nika on the other side of the virtual. Over to you, Kings.
Thank you, Noli. Hello, dear listeners and co-editors. This is where we explore the hidden patterns that shape our lives. I am Kinga Szilágyi, facilitator and guide through the field where unseen truths rise to the surface. Together we walk the invisible terrain of the family soul, where the wisdom that speaks is when the system reveals itself.
Thank you for joining our movement of translating the wisdom of systemic family constellations into a practical language that all of us can understand and, most importantly, implement in our daily lives. This is the Field Knows series. Imagine a bright golden light that has been covered by a thick, heavy top. To the outside world, that light is hidden, and the top looks like a dark, immovable, and perhaps even ugly shape.
The dark shape is what our client called her jealousy. She entered the field carrying the deep shame of feeling like a green-eyed monster. Despite being a pillar of her community, she felt poisoned from within.
She spent years trying to suppress these feelings through sheer willpower, affirmations, journals, and talk therapy. But the more she pushed the jealousy away, the more it mutated into physical sickness.
She felt a literal clenched fist in her solar plexus every time a friend shared a good news. It turned out that the jealousy was most intense when she saw women who were unapologetic.
Women who didn't shrink or seek permission to exist triggered a wave of nausea and rage in her. She thought this meant she was a hater. But in the field, we saw something much more tender.
She wasn't angry at the woman. She was angry at the unapologetic self she had buried at age 2 to match her mother's frequency. When we deny our own greatness to save our parents, we become allergic to it in others.
We invited a representative for jealousy to stand. The client expected a monster, but the representative looked bored. They said, "I'm wearing a costume that's too small for me. I don't feel like an enemy."
This is the first systemic insight. The flow is often a mislabeled energy. We brought in comparison, who looked at jealousy and said, "I don't see envy, I see confidence, but it feels dangerous. It looks like arrogance."
The jealousy's representative suddenly woke up. That's it. I'm unbeatable. But I was told that being unbeatable made me arrogant. I was told that if I stood in my power, I was being too much for the people I love.
The client started to tremble. Her jealousy was the pain of seeing others possess the very confidence she had exiled from herself. She was envious of her own stolen potential.
Every time she saw an unapologetic woman, her soul tried to remind her of who she actually was. Her mind intercepted the message and turned it into envy to protect her from the guilt of outshining her mother.
The jealousy was actually a placeholder for humble confidence. It was the energy of a victor being forced to play the role of a victim just to belong to her family.
But why was this power exiled? We noticed the representative for the client's inner state shifted. They weren't an adult anymore. They were crouching on the floor, representing the 2-year-old self.
This little one was the original owner of the unbeatable light. She was the one who made a secret deal. I will dim my bulb so that my mother doesn't feel blinded in her darkness.
The adult self was standing on the edge, ashamed of this jealous child. But the child wasn't jealous. The child was just loyal to a fault, holding the power in trust until it was safe to use.
To bridge this gap, we had to see the mother. We had to see the weight the 2 years old was trying to help her carry. We had to look at the heavy necklace occupying the maternal line.
The blind constellation and the real necklace. We moved into a blind constellation to bypass the brain's defensive story. Kinga brought in the representative for the mother, who was wearing a real heavy necklace, a piece of jewelry that became the somatic center.
The moment the mother representative stepped in, she began to choke. She described the necklace as a weight that felt like lead around her throat. It forced her to look at the ground away from her daughter.
This necklace represented the grief of the grandmother who died when the client was 2 years old. The mother had been carrying her mother's death like a physical chain for decades. She was unavailable because she was looking at the dead.
The client's whole body slumped. She said, I feel like I have to catch her. She is falling. The 2-year-old child had stepped in to be the mother to her mother, sacrificing her own childhood to stabilize the system.
This is the tragedy of the rescuer child. You cannot be unbeatable while your mother is defeated by grief. It feels like a betrayal to be happy when the one who gave you life is suffering.
But there is the movement of the field. The mother representative reached for her neck. She realized the weight wasn't her own jewelry. It was a burden she had taken from the grandmother.
Without a word, she took it off. She dropped the necklace. The sound of that physical metal hitting the floor with a sharp clink changed the frequency of the entire room. It was the sound of a generational curse breaking.
The mother representative stood up straight, her spine lengthened, her eyes cleared. She looked big. She looked like a mother who could finally hold her child instead of needing to be held by one.
But the 2-year-old self was still on the floor, curled in a ball. Even though the mother was standing, the child was still frozen in the deal she made 30 years ago.
I turned to the client and said, Your mother is standing now. She can handle her own fate. But your little one is still waiting for you to come and get her.
This was the holy moment. The client entered the field as her adult self. She stopped being a spectator of her own trauma and became the active healer of her own soul.
The adult walked toward the center, closing the distance between the jealous adult and the unbeatable child. She saw that the child wasn't bad. The child was a hero who had been holding the light in the dark.
The representatives for authenticity and humble confidence moved to stand behind the child, creating a pillar of support. The mistaken identity was beginning to dissolve in a new, integrated truth.
The client realized she didn't need to save her mother anymore. Her mother was holding her own weight now. The client only needed to save the part of herself left behind in the basement of the family home.
She was finally face to face with the source of her jealousy, not an enemy to be conquered, but a powerful toddler who was ready to be unbeatable again in the sunlight.
The field settled. The clenched fist in the client's stomach began to loosen for the first time in her adult life. The energy of comparison was finally running out of fuel. You are still listening to Younique Yet Connected. The theme for this episode is Mistaken Identity, Transforming Jealousy into Authenticity. Remember, when you comment, ask questions, like and share our content, you help us grow and change lives together. Like us on Facebook and Instagram at Younique Yet Connected.
Releasing the blindness and reclaiming the 2-year-old. As the adult client knelt before her 2-year-old self, the representative for comparison stood over them, but they were no longer looking left or right at what others had. Their gaze turned inward.
Comparison dropped the need to compete. Their faces radiated a quiet, unshakable power. They announced, "My name is not comparison anymore. My name is authenticity."
The adult client reached out and touched the child's hands. She said, "I see you now. I see what you did. You weren't a bad child for being jealous. You were just keeping our power safe."
The child representative began to breathe. The frozen state dissolved. The energy of humble confidence, which had been mislabeled as jealousy, began to flow into the adult's body like a warm current.
The client burst into tears of pure, visceral relief. The relief that comes when a lie of separation is finally dismissed and the self is whole again. She wasn't a monster. She was just a victor in hiding.
She pulled the 2-year-old self into a deep embrace. She was no longer looking at unapologetic women with rage. She was looking at them with recognition. She finally realized, "I am one of them."
The mother representative then did something beautiful. She picked up that necklace from the floor. She held it in her hands, acknowledging it as her history. but she didn't put it back on.
The mother said to the adult kind, I am big enough now. You go and be unbeatable. You don't have to stay in the dark to keep me company anymore.
Client's physical symptoms: the fist in the solar plexus, the shoulder tension simply vanished. She understood she had been fighting her own foundational trait just to stay loyal to her mother's pain.
When the gift of authenticity is accepted, the jealousy mask is no longer needed. The energy spent on resentment is released back into the system, fueling her own success and celebration of others.
She stood up, and for the first time in 30 years, she didn't look like a good daughter trying to be perfect. She looked like a woman who was 100% herself.
The inner bond was mended. She wasn't an envious person. She was a powerful person who had finally come home to her own skin. The mistaken identity had been traded for an authentic presence.
The shadowed mirror of her mother's grave had been wiped clean, revealing the unbeatable reflection that had been there since she was 2 years old.
Integration is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before you decided you had to be small to be loved.
As she left the field, her walk had changed. It was slower, more grounded, and infinitely more powerful. She no longer needed to look at anyone else to know her own height.
This is the ultimate goal of the constellation, to turn a burden back into resource. Jealousy, when understood, is simply the source compass, pointing toward our own exiled power.
Key lesson and integration. By the end of the session, the jealousy was no longer defined solely as a flaw. It was recognized as a protective, mistaken identity. We don't heal by rejecting the feeling. We heal by reclaiming the child behind it.
The greatest act of self-love is the act of integration. You cannot love 50% of yourself. You cannot love the good daughter and hate the jealous monster. You must claim the full 100%.
Honor the pain by acknowledging it, and honor yourself by receiving the power you spent a lifetime turning away from. Authenticity is the only cure for envy.
So tonight, as you settle into your own rhythm, maybe ask yourself, where in my life am I still blindly rejecting a necessary strength because I judge it as too much?
What a relief awaits when you finally choose to see your own unbeatable nature. If you feel that subtle ache of being disconnected from yourself, it's time to find that shadowed mirror.
Join us at Younique Yet Connected, because sometimes the greatest act of connection isn't with others, but with the parts of ourselves we left behind at age 2 or 3.
Reflection exercise. We want to take a moment for you, our listener. This is deep territory, and your soul may already be responding.
Locate the shadow. Close your eyes if you are safe. Think of that shameful jealousy or that feeling of being not enough. Where do you feel it in your body? The question: ask your inner child, Did I hide my light so that my mother or father wouldn't feel alone in their darkness? Did I give up my unbeatable nature just to stay loyal to their sadness? The meeting. Imagine your adult self walking toward the 2-year-old child in the field of your heart. Reach out your hands and look into those eyes. The sentence. Say to them internally, I see your bravery. I see your loyalty. But the deal is over. I'm taking us home to our own light. We are finally allowed to be unbeatable. Breathe in that permission. You are not a hater. You are a victor who is finally allowed to stop shrinking. Authenticity is waiting for you to say yes.
In the next episode, we still share with you how the field reveals the roots, the repetition, and the release.
And along the way, we will guide you in understanding how this work can support your own healing, because the field doesn't just know my story, it knows yours too.
So take a deep breath, open your heart, and join us as we share with you what the field knows.
Because sometimes what you are searching for isn't outside of you. It is waiting quietly in the field for you to remember.
A big thank you to you for listening to our episode, and to Nick Mons from That Guy Productions for making us sound fabulous and on point.
For episode 96, tune in on Sunday, 31st of May 2026 from 10 a.m. South African Standard Time. For links and updates, stay tuned to our Facebook and Instagram pages at Younique Yet Connected, Younique spelled YOUNIQUE.
Stay unique, stay connected, and remember, you are one of a kind. We can only create a really meaningful podcast together. Siyabulela, Kosonom, Bayadanki.
Thank you. Siyabulela, Kusanam, Bayadanki.